I'm still thinking about last week at the leaders' debates in Montreal because it was one of the strangest days of my life. The mainstream media are still talking about it too, especially the CBC, especially the French CBC for some reason. They're still writing about it. Not the debates themselves, which are actually interesting, but our audacity as citizen journalists for wanting to attend and ask questions in the media scrum afterwards. I know that some media people care and some political people care and some critics of the media and politics care, but for normal Canadians, for millions of ordinary people, they just don't care. I mean, that's not the news. That was a sideshow. But why is it an obsession for the media party? Why? I think it's because some of them have become radicalized. They're starting to believe their own propaganda that Rebel News and Juno News and Western Standard and the others are like terrifying January 6 rioters or truckers or whatever their worst nightmare is. I tell you, the emotional outburst by several of the journalists felt like a mental breakdown, not a thoughtfully articulated criticism of us. I mean, here's one guy from the Hill Times.
Yeah, after you guys threatened to sue, that's why they got the 4 questions, because the commission...
You're making that up. You're lying again.
When did the CBC get 4 questions?
Yesterday.
Yes, after they had already folded to you because you threatened to sue.
You're lying again.
I'm not. Because you're not. Don't you have a third-party advertising truck to go take care of?
You're lying.
How much have you spent on third-party advertising this election? Between Rebel News and Ford Canada, companies you own both of, how much money have you spent to influence this election? I'm assuming in favor of conservatives. How much have you spent? Like, you're a journalist, you must be honest.
Zero.
So, Rebel News Limited, you've set up and registered under Elections Canada. Everyone else, you can go to Elections Canada right now. Every third party is registered. Search Rebel News for Canada, and you will see clear as day, as will Avant, as the owner of both of those companies. He has third-party advertising trucks driving around this venue right now.
That's not a Rebel News ad on there. You're lying.
It's owned by Rebel. It's owned by you.
Yeah, that guy was cuckoo. And there was another guy from a left-wing outlet called Ricochet who was literally shaking while shouting conspiracy theories at me. Did you see that?
Because of you, we can't ask questions on behalf of the public. Because you wanted to have a media circus.
Maybe your ally shouldn't be trying to get the commission to do something unlawful.
It's embarrassing. Look at all of you. Look at all of you. What journalistic rationale is there to have this many people in the room? What journalistic rationale is there?
There's not 13 of us.
Yeah.
There absolutely are 13 of you. There absolutely are. I saw Cian Bexty coming over to Ezra throughout the debate. Cian Bexty, who supposedly has a different media outlet, was taking direction from Ezra.
You're wrong. Cian Bexty doesn't work for Rebel News.
So why did he come over to you 3 times for direction during the debate? He showed you on the he showed you his phone, and he took direction from you during this debate. So I don't think that Cian Bexty is independent of you. I don't believe that.
Cian because we're friends?
We're not allowed to talk to people?
People here.
He's shaking.
Which is much less than the CBC has. You've got to control your emotions. I know you don't like me or Rebel News, and that's okay. But
what I don't like, Ezra, is you preventing us from being able to ask questions on behalf of the public.
How have I done that?
You created...
Yeah, it was crazy. I think there was some mental health issues there. It's sort of cult-like. And I don't know, it was a bit like what we saw during COVID. You know, that phrase mass formation psychosis, a kind of ultra peer pressure. For other people, though, it was frustrating that we worked harder than them. What I mean by that is we got in the line to ask questions faster than they did. We had perhaps better questions than they did. That bothered some of them who were a little bit lazy. For many, though, it was a content-based objection. Like I say, there were 4 CBC journalists that asked questions and 4 rebels who asked questions. No one complained that the CBC dominated the coverage because they asked liberal-friendly questions, didn't they? They hated our questions precisely because they were alternative questions, telling the other side of the story. We were freedom-oriented. We're not in the pocket of the government. And finally, and I guess it's related, is the fact that we aren't part of the great elect Carney movement. The CBC is in jeopardy in this election. If Pierre Poilievre wins, he says he will defund the CBC and scrap other, liberal plans to colonize the media. So everyone in that press room, not just the CBC, everyone was in there to save their jobs by saving Carney's job. And we were a threat to that. So they wanted to do all the question asking, softball questions for Carney, hardball questions for Poilievre. That's really what it came down to. Here's an example. A few weeks ago, a mainstream media journalist asked Pierre Poilievre how many sexes there are. These days, that's a very relevant question, a legal question too. Take a look.
First day on the job, President Trump signed an executive order, the U.S. government only recognizing two genders, male, female. They're unchangeable. If elected as prime minister, is that something that you're going to kind of walk in line with, or what are your feelings on that executive order?
Well, I don't know. Do you have any other genders that you'd like to name?
Me personally?
Yes.
I'm just asking more so if you're in line with what he is saying. Do you agree with what he's saying? Is that something that you would be lockstep with if elected as prime minister?
Well, I'm not aware of any other genders than men and women. I mean, if you have any other that you want me to consider, you're welcome to tell me right now.
Well, there's personally, I am a man. As people say, cis man. There are people there who, they say they're gender neutral. Well, you're a man, totally. Yes. There are people there who say they're gender neutral. Yeah, they say they're gender neutral. They're a trans person. Is that something that you would recognize here? Whereas in the States, at least with their U.S. government, the way they're seeing it, there's only two.
I'm only aware of two, but I mean, if you come up with another list, then you're welcome to do that. But I'm aware of two. And as far as I'm concerned, we should have a government that just minds its own damn business and leaves people alone to make their own personal decisions. That's the kind of government I'm going to run.
Fair question. But when a citizen journalist asked that same question of Mark Carney, the CBC was outraged. Here's the question.
Alex Zoltan with True North. If you thought my friend's question was odd, you're going to love this one.
I'm glad you self-assessed that. Okay.
How many genders are there?
There, in terms of sex, there are two. Thank you.
My follow-up question then, do you believe that women, biological women, have the right to their own spaces, their own sports, their own change rooms, their own prisons, their own homeless shelters?
I think this is Canada, and that as a general objective, yes. But we work in where we value all Canadians for who they are, and we'll continue to do so. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's a fair question. And here's the CBC furious about that question.
But Rosie, I'm curious what stood out to you, because at one point when some of those last questions came up, I just checked to make sure, we're in Canada. Because the identity politics questions have not emerged much.
This happens on the same day that the United Kingdom court ruled that woman and sex refer to biological woman and biological sex. True North is a very right-wing website, and there have been issues in the past with who gets allowed into these scrums and who's allowed to ask questions of the leaders. The commission, Debates Commission, was the one who decided that these people were allowed to come in and ask these kinds of questions. So there you go.
Here's another example. In past years, the mainstream media has absolutely savaged any conservative who wasn't for fighting global warming or carbon taxes or net zero or any of that. It was the number one theme of any questions they would ask in debates gone by, in interviews. Anyone, especially any conservative who said global warming wasn't important, was called a dangerous dinosaur. Get with it. I think it was definitely the number one issue for the media party. Until the moment it wasn't. Until the moment Mark Carney realized it was a vote killer, so he just canceled the carbon tax, or paused it, I think is more accurate. And the entire media party, every journalist who had just gone at it past conservative leaders like Andrew Scheer and Erin O'Toole, they just sort of nodded, and they all immediately agreed to forget about the issue of climate change just altogether. They never meant it anyways. They only used it as a weapon against conservatives. So when they said, our children's future is at stake, when they said it was the biggest issue of the age, they never meant it. So I think that's a big reason why they raged against us being in the debate scrum. And obviously the harsh reality that our very presence means that millions of Canadians are not satisfied with what the mainstream media are providing them, so they come to us instead, and we manage to compete somehow or even outcompete with the mainstream media despite having no money or government privileges. So it's all that, and it's pitiful. And when we were in the line, our Rebel team was writing up some questions for each leader. Now, we didn't, in the end, have a chance to ask questions of Mark Carney, and of course, they canceled the second night. And it's too bad because he will never be asked the most basic questions because he cuts off access to everyone except the reliable liberal media. You cannot get a question to Mark Carney. And since we'll never have the chance to ask them because he'd arrest us for getting too close to him, I thought I'd share with you the questions that we drafted. Here they are. Too bad the regime journalists won't ever ask them, but here are the questions that we had written to ask Mark Carney at the debate that the CBC pressured the Debates Commission into canceling. Here's one. What do you think of this? Your party, Mr. Carney, has been accused of anti-Semitism. Last week, Israel's prime minister went so far as to issue a public rebuke. Here's my question. Your candidate in Victoria, Will Graves, wrote after October 7th, quote, "People get kidnapped. It's a terrible thing that happens, especially in conflict zones. But they were kidnapped from Israel due to a massive failure of Israeli national security and are being held in a territory under active invasion by Israel. What else do you propose?" How many times can your candidate say things like this without people concluding that your party is in fact anti-Semitic? And how many times can you excuse comments like this without people concluding you are too? What do you think of that question? Here's one. It's about migrants and housing. In the last few years, Canada has added 2 million people each year between foreign students, temporary foreign workers, refugees, and regular immigrants. 2 million a year. You're an economist, Mr. Carney, and you understand supply and demand. How much of our housing affordability crisis is because of mass immigration? Or are you unwilling to criticize that sacred cow? I don't know. I wish someone would ask him that. Here's a question that we would have put to him about trans, although someone else beat us to it. Today, the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom ruled unanimously that trans women are not legally women. This could stop biological men from entering women's places like women's bathrooms, women's sports teams, and women's prisons. The United States has brought in similar policies through executive orders. Do you agree or disagree? Should trans women legally be the same as women? I think that's a good one. I had one on Chinese tariffs, too. Here's what I would have asked. Mr. Carney, you told us you're boycotting U.S. alcohol because of tariffs. China has put 100% tariffs on canola, which could cost Canadian farmers, primarily in Saskatchewan, billions. But they're Western farmers from provinces that don't vote Liberal. Have you boycotted anything Chinese because of that? I ask because you haven't put retaliatory tariffs on China either. In fact, I checked and you haven't even tweeted about it. Why? I think that's a good question.